Welcome back, everyone. I'm Harshal, your lead instructor, and man, I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for part 35 of our Masterclass Explainer. Today, we're unpacking ICD-10 PCS, respiratory and thoracic system procedures. We've got a ton of fascinating ground to cover, but really quickly, before we jump in, if you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal. All right, let's get into it. So, just a quick recap. In Part 34, we navigated the twists and turns of the gastrointestinal and hepatobiliary systems, figuring out how to perfectly code procedures for the stomach, intestines, and liver. But today we're pivoting our focus and descending right into the chest. We're going to explore the respiratory tract, really dissecting those specific rules that make coding for the lungs and airways so unique and honestly, so incredibly interesting. Here's our game plan for today's explainer. We'll start with a respiratory system overview, then tackle bronchoscopy and biopsies, dive into the great debate of resections versus excisions, look at pleural cavity procedures, and finally tie it all together with a final summary. Okay, Section 1, Respiratory System Overview. Let's build that foundation.
So, body system B. This encompasses the entire respiratory anatomy. We're talking everything from the delicate bronchial structures and the tracheobronchial tree straight down to the lungs and the surrounding pleura. Basically, whenever you're coding a procedure in this specific anatomical neighborhood, your second character in PCS is almost always going to be B. Now, here's a totally fascinating anatomy rule that literally dictates everything we do in PCS. The coding manual actually doesn't view the lung as just one giant organ. Instead, subdivisions, like the right upper lobe or the left lower lobe, act as entirely separate body parts with their own specific values. Grasping this difference between the whole organ and its subdivisions, that's going to be your absolute secret weapon later on in this lesson. Keep it in your back pocket.
Moving right along to Section 2, Bronchoscopy and Biopsies.
So how exactly do we code procedures when a physician just looks into and samples these respiratory structures? Well, first, let's talk about what happens when we just take a look around. Think of the root operation inspection as a pure reconnaissance mission. If a physician performs a diagnostic bronchoscopy where the sole objective is just to examine the tracheobronchial tree without cutting a single thing, this falls under inspection, which is character J. The scope goes in, takes a look around, comes back out without disturbing anything. Boom, just an inspection.
But, what happens when that reconnaissance turns into actual sample collection? Well, not all biopsies are created equal. If a doctor performs an endobronchial or transbronchial biopsy where they actually use a sharp instrument to cut out a tiny piece of tissue, that is coded to the root operation excision, which is character B. However, if they perform a bronchoalveolar lavage, meaning they just wash out fluid from the bronchial tree to collect cells, we aren't cutting any tissue, right? So that's coded to the root operation drainage, character 9. And here is the golden key. Whether it's an excision or a drainage, because the intent is a biopsy, both of these require you to use the diagnostic qualifier. That's character X right there in the 7th position of your code.
All right, Section 3, Resections versus Excisions. This is a big one.
We really need to draw a hard line in the sand between these two root operations, because this is honestly one of the most common points of confusion for medical coding students. Excision, character B, means cutting out a portion of a body part without replacement. Think of a wedge resection of the lung, right? You're just taking a small slice out. But resection, character T, is cutting out all of a body part, or, and this is absolutely vital, cutting out an entire recognized anatomical subdivision that has its own specific body part value.
To put that into perspective, consider a right upper lung lobectomy. The surgeon isn't taking the whole right lung, so your instinct probably screams, hey, that's an excision. But remember that golden anatomy rule we talked about earlier? Because that upper lobe has its very own specific body part value in PCS, removing it completely means you are removing an entire designated body part. Therefore, it's a resection, character T. It's basically the total demolition of a defined zone, rather than just taking a little piece of it.
And actually, while we're on the topic of major airway surgeries, I want to briefly touch on creating new airway access, like a tracheostomy. When we surgically alter the route of passage of the contents of a tubular body part, so in this case routing air from the trachea directly out to the skin or exterior, we are performing the root operation bypass, and that's character 1.
Let's step out a bit. Section 4, Pleural Cavity Procedures. So imagine the pleural cavity as this sort of protective envelope wrapping right around the lungs.
When excess fluid or gas gets trapped inside that envelope, well, we've got to let it out. And this brings us right back to the root operation drainage, character 9, formally defined as taking or letting out fluids or gases from a body part. This is really our go-to root operation for therapeutic procedures in the thoracic area.
Take a simple thoracentesis, for example. That's using a needle to draw out fluid. That is straight-up drainage with no device. But if a chest tube is left in place to continuously drain the area, your 6th character absolutely must reflect a drainage device, which is value 0. Oh, and one quick, super important note on the pleural space. If a physician performs a chemical pleurodesis to artificially fuse the pleura and obliterate that space, you code it as destruction, character 5, or insertion, character H. That depends entirely on the specific chemical agent used.
Okay, we are in the home stretch. Section 5, final summary.
We have covered some incredibly detailed territory today, so let's lock in these 4 golden rules for respiratory PCS coding. 1. Your anatomy dictates excision versus resection. Take out an entire lobe, it's a resection because lobes have their own values. 2. Biopsies aren't just one single root operation. Tissue means excision, fluid means drainage, but they both need that 7th character diagnostic qualifier. 3. Scopes are just inspections, unless the doctor actually cuts, drains, or extracts something while they're there. And 4. Whenever a drainage procedure leaves a catheter in place like a chest tube, you've got to capture that with a device character in position 6. Got it? Awesome.
We have successfully conquered the chest and the respiratory system today, and you should feel incredibly proud of the complex logic you've just mastered. It's a lot to take in, but our anatomical journey certainly doesn't stop here. In Part 36, we're going to move down the body to tackle genitourinary and renal system procedures. You won't want to miss it. As we prepare to leave the chest cavity, I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. Will these strict rules of excision and resection actually hold up when we reach the complex, microscopic filtration systems of the kidneys? You'll have to join me next time to find out. Keep coding, keep learning, and as always, if you are enjoying this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and share it with friends for this free course on Decode Healthcare with Harshal.